They're still trying to destroy my father's legacy. They have no idea what I've got in store for them. I have the ultimate weapon. And not just one. Thousands of them!
Und schrei nicht wie ein Schaf, sonst kommt das Schild aus Himbeeren und beißt mein böses Kind.
Good morning, noon, evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Alegende and welcome back to Waffenträger and a look back series. And today we're going to take a look back at the last Waffenträger event, or in this case the return of the Waffenträger and Waffenträger Legacy. Although we already took a look back at specifically the last Waffenträger event, I think to follow this up with the two new versions of this game mode is still a valuable thing to do. In that case we might not call it a look back at, but more like a look back again at. So in this version of follow-up look back videos on game modes I did a look back at already, we can take a look at some of the feedback or improvement points that I made on the last video regarding the game mode. How the game mode has changed to its newer version, or versions in this case, and how it might develop further down into the future. But with that little explainer out of the way, let's dive into the Waffenträger events once again. So let's start off with the feedback points of the previous video of the last Waffenträger event that I made. And the first point was the variations of the same map. So this was basically making the point that the same maps of random battles were used but were altered slightly in order to fit the game mode a little bit better. We have seen very little of it happening, although credit where credit is due, we currently have somewhat alternative looking maps in the Onslaught game mode. But more details about those changes are coming in a look back video on Onslaught later in the future. So after taking a look back at this specific point, I think that these map variations aren't really at home in the random battles, even though I still think that would be an interesting concept. The fact that it has occurred several times in special game modes is still somewhat admirable. But I would also like completely new custom made maps for these game modes as well. Maybe make it yet another way to test out new map concepts, or return maps from the recon missions to these special game modes. There are just so many possibilities besides creating a completely new map without repetitive content, so that would be pretty much my advice for now. Just make a mixed mash of completely new maps, or recycled old maps, or removed maps even. The difficulty depending on the Waffenträger player skill. This was the biggest issue I had with the first Waffenträger event, but I want to come back and renounce my remark on limiting the Waffenträger E100 with only an AI controlling it. I think keeping the possibility for the Waffenträger to be controlled by players is a too unique and fun element to ditch in favor of balance. Especially after several years, it might have done more harm to the enjoyment of this game mode. Besides, the last version of the game mode is actually quite balanced. I will explain that a bit later. And finally, I made a point about more similarities between real life and technological developments, specifically using electromagnetism in a railgun format, which we also see in real life. I haven't really seen or noticed more new special game modes taking reference from real life technology, but come to think about it, there isn't really that much more, at least in tank combat. Even the whole railgun concept is a weapon system mainly usable on warships. The only thing I can think of are main battle tanks, maybe having those as a special tier 11 or higher during their own special game mode. So that was all about the 10, so let's return towards the now and what kind of new features we got with the 2 new versions of the Waffenträger game mode. So let's start off with the return of the Waffenträger from 2021. So in this version there were more different tanks, which was a great addition, a great amount of variation added towards this game mode. Although the Resistor is still quite the favorite, having to play some other tanks like the Patton or the Batchet was some great variation which alleviated some stillness after playing several battles in the same tank. There were also more abilities for both the Harriers and the Waffenträger. So the railgun ability, which increases the damage but decreases other gun characteristics, was all around good and a fun ability to use. Really useful to deal a lot of damage towards high HP sentinels or immediately fire as many of those shots when the shields of the Waffenträger was down. The American siege mode was also quite a fun ability to use, especially good against the sentinels. When you start off the battle, you immediately drive towards one of their camps, activate your ability and whittle them down quite fast. The French Ballistic Dome is a more niche ability, but you can get out of a certain death situation. And lastly, the teleport function of the Waffenträger was quite a interesting ability, which made the Waffenträger even stronger than it already was. Although it's somewhat balanced with the Harriers also getting their own abilities, the fact that you could teleport almost all the time with a, well, relative in my opinion, short cooldown, and also in this version in Return of the Waffenträger, even when one of the generators was destroyed, you could still teleport away, and I especially use advantage during those times to get towards the other side of the map in order to buy me some extra time in order not to receive full damage. And lastly, in this version the soundtrack was changed and vocals were added to the music, which was an amazing feature. These vocals were actually a fantasy language based on German with some Baltic and Slavic slang mixed into it. It was really fun but quite hard to translate that in my mashup video, but it just creates more depth for this game mode and I love to see these small features getting added to it. So moving on, a year later we got the Waffenträger Legacy of 2022 and this got a lot more new features added into it. Well, first of all, no longer you were playing against Max von Krieger but rather his daughter Ermelinda. But alongside with that you now have infinite life as Harriers. This was the best balancing factor, which makes many more risky plays common in which you can make more progression. Or if you fuck up and make a wrong turn or make a wrong calculation, you don't instantly lose the battle because you basically lost one of your 3 chances before you get permanently destroyed. I also like that it is not that you instantly respawn, but as you get killed more and more often, the amount of time it takes to respawn also gets longer. So you still need to be very careful not to get killed all the time, but you can make more risky plays and not get punished too hard for it. There was also more time to deliver plasma when driving fast enough. This was a really good buff as well, because even if you might not make it towards one generator, because most of the times the Waffenträger was camping it, you could still make it towards the other one at the other side of the map if you drove fast enough. And then the best and biggest balance, the 300 IQ balance, and it was balancing the Waffenträger through missions. And as well the teleportation ability got somewhat nerfed. So this was by far the best way to nerf the Waffenträger without actually nerfing the tank itself. Because what this actually did, this nerf only worked when the Waffenträger is played by actual players and not with AI. Because the players are now motivated to prolong the battles. Because the missions and the rewards you get from them, which were pulls from the loot boxes for the engineer side, which could give you the best prizes. I got an Emil 9051 out of it. It motivates to prolong the battle because it requires you to deal as much damage and get as many kills in the Waffenträger. And this way, sometimes you deliberately let the Harriers destroy some of the generators, even though you could have easily stopped it. Because that way they got more time to fight you, but also you got more time to deal more damage. And the best is just that there weren't really missions in which you needed to win in the Waffenträger. But I still really like to win, thus I never really got it that far. And when the generators were destroyed, you couldn't teleport anymore. So that whole trick or teleporting away after a generator was destroyed didn't really work anymore. But in this version, it is knowing when you cannot help to save the generator and you think you cannot spare a lot of HP anymore. So you must notice it early enough to teleport away before the generator got destroyed. We also got a changed progression system. Nowadays it looks more like the Battle Pass progression system. Thank God not with a premium version of a progression, but you still got the loot boxes, and there weren't really any stickers anymore, which in previous versions you could get from just playing. Those were only in the loot boxes, which was a bit of a shame, but not as bad as the actual 2 version of loot boxes. The cheap and free Harriers loot boxes and the paying Engineers loot boxes, which of course had the best prizes into it. And I find it a real shame that there's still so lot of attention to the Engineers loot boxes and enticement to gamble for exciting new tanks. This year it was extra filthy because Wargaming used the Chieftain marketing brand for the Chieftain prototype, which wasn't really that well after several people tried it out in random battles. So I still denounce the whole loot boxes, limited loot boxes with the best prizes, which you need to pay quite a bit of money in order to get the tank that you want. It's just not the way. But I know that Wargaming isn't letting those go because they make too much money for them. And finally we got the Waffenträger rentals. And this was an amazing implementation to experience this removed tank. So I tried it out and I got some mixed feelings about it, because it's hard to master the tank, because it's, well, your turret is still made out of paper and you're absolutely huge, so you can get hit by pretty much anything, especially artillery. So you need to play it somewhat careful, but if the situation is in your favor, I immediately knew why this tank got eventually removed, because it is really strong when it gets into a favorable situation. The only thing I'm wondering now is, when is it the Chieftain's turn? So in general, this Waffenträger event has gone to several good developments, and I think that the game mode itself has some very good improvements. It is no longer that imbalanced. I think it's easier to win if you have good collaborations in your platoons as Harriers. It is easier to split up to make the Waffenträger choose which generator he wants to protect. And in general, I think that it's still quite hard in order to beat it. Of course, the Waffenträger is still a strong tank in that game mode, but it's not that ridiculously imbalanced between skilled players and lesser skilled players as it used to be, due to all those changes. And before we look into the future, I want to talk a bit about the extended storylines that developed during the years. So what more did we get to know about the characters within this game mode? So Max von Krieger, let's start off with him. Well, he actually doesn't really want to call himself Max von Krieger. His full name is Maximilian Leonard von Krieger-Witthofen, Baron zu Ledensburg. But I recall that in one video he calls himself Max von Krieger, so a bit of, well, fluctuations between large egotistical man who thinks that Max von Krieger sounds like a name for a milkman to somebody who is just stating his own name as some kind of a performance name, I guess. So what do we know more about Max von Krieger except his full name? So Max von Krieger is born, I just call him Max von Krieger, is born in 1900 and went through both world wars fighting for the Germans. During the Second World War, he really tried to improve survivability for armored vehicles by the use of electromagnetism. He is inspired by the works of Tesla and the developments of Edison, but he thinks the main inventions of his are quite unique, relating much closer towards electricity itself, so he thinks he might as well be inspired by Zeus or Thor. So a few years after the Second World War, he took participation in the Steel Hunter game mode and got noticed by the Alliance. They changed his name to von Hoffmann, and Max started to work alongside the Alliance for years. But at some point he parted ways with the Alliance, but why did that happen? Well, from the perspective of the Alliance, he bypassed the ban of construction of combat vehicles weighing over 80 tons, and also due to the deliberate sabotage of development of the project. However, in his eyes, he improved the formulas so much that they become incomprehensible for the Alliance, and they thought that he had destroyed the, for them, good but insignificant previous formulas for absolute gibberish. Also, he noted that he really doesn't like the name teleportation, but more passage through the subspace. And out of that whole story, we might know that Max and Ermelinda are in that specific subspace, only appearing back to resupply. So that is especially a very interesting statement. So the moment that Max is teleporting from one side to the other, that instant time during the teleport where he is, well, nowhere, could he be at a certain space where the time flow is different, maybe? Or could he have enough energy to maintain a presence in that subspace? So it really is a lot of question marks right there, but it is an interesting theory. Then we also got Ermelinda Young, which I noticed immediately has a different surname than her father, but I think it's quite similar towards Max von Krieger, because his full name is a bit longer, so I think Ermelinda's full name is also longer, but it's more like a stage name in this case, and the Young from the German word Jungfrau or young lady, in which her father stated that restraint fits a decent Jungfrau, although we know that Ermelinda got a lot of things going for her, but restraint isn't really one of it. And she seems to have a special vendetta against Villanella, because she called her Villanella. And speaking about Villanella Rapier, the only thing we know somewhat is that she was a comrade of Max during the Steel Hunter program as commander of the Harlequin, and also kept close contact with him during his work for the Alliance. noted that she was the only one that somewhat could talk to him, or maybe even convince him to, well, not go the path that he was going. But much more we don't know about those characters yet. But maybe we will in the future. So what is going to be the next year's Waffenträger event? And there are several questions I have that might be answered during those game modes in the future. So my first question is, where has Max gone to? Because this year his daughter, Ermelinda, took over his place, but where was he during this time? We only see out of the journal of Ermelinda that he has been gone on one of his adventures. Maybe some different technological advancements or other experiments, maybe. But that's really the main question I have for this year. Where did Max go to? Maybe we will find out next year. Also, who is Ermelinda's mother and Max his wife? So regarding that subject, my eyes will peek a lot towards Villanella Rapier. And on one hand, it could not possibly be Rapier because of the quote that Max made. If only your mother knew that the former employee would brand me as a bachelor. It sounds like the mother or Max, his wife, is not part of the alliance and somebody completely separated. But on the other hand, it could be Rapier because also Ermelinda was first announced to be Max, his assistant, instead of his daughter that was later. And that inconsistency might also be apparent with Rapier, so it would be interesting. I really would love the idea that Villanella Rapier is the mother or the lost wife, that the secret mother or the secret wife. That would make the whole relationship between Ermelinda and Villanella a lot more interesting as well. But going back towards Max himself and his subspace where he resides, we might be taking a closer peek towards that subspace next year. Maybe the Alliance has gone far enough to make their presence in their subspace and making their move towards the residence of Max in that subspace. Maybe Waffenträger Last Front, Waffenträger Subspace? I don't know, maybe something like that. And what kind of gameplay elements would we see? Are there going to be more vehicles present with that special electromagnetic style? Maybe the Progetto, the TVP or the Judas might appear, or the Centurion X10. Are there going to be more abilities like fire starting rounds or automatic tracking rounds? And lastly, are there going to be bigger matches with bigger team sizes on both the Harrier squad as well on the Waffenträger sides, with instead of one Waffenträger, maybe two? Both Ermelinda and Max being present at the same time. Now you need to fight off two Waffenträgers at the same time. Maybe on bigger maps as well. Maybe the frontline maps remodeled. Well, frontline is really big. Maybe something more in the sense of the grand battles, which we don't really see much about because it's not really a popular game mode. So a lot of speculations and a lot to look forward to, which might be appearing next year. But generally, let's take a quick conclusion towards these developed game mode of the Waffenträger, and I just like it. I like the whole fact that it's once a year, just about a week. It's long enough. It's really unique and interesting having to play again a 1 versus 6 with a removed overpowered tank now taking the main stage. And generally also the storyline that is developing over the years. So I keep enjoying this game mode. I see very little improvements to make from now on gameplay wise. It is just there can be more content added to it, either maps or more tanks or more abilities, and of course the story can develop further as well. But that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Laters!